The world turns, and with each turn, a change. And each change makes it more complex, unpredictable, enigmatic. The world keeps turning. And from the Pellicer Heredia practice, we anticipate everything that is going to happen. Brexit, artificial intelligence, new commercial borders, legal tech. The world keeps turning, and it commands the reliance on international lawyers who are capable of interpreting this new reality with integrity, honesty, and transparency, offering answers to so many new questions. Whatever it is, ask us. At Pellicer Heredia, we know how.
Hello, everyone. I don't know if you are able to listening already. My name is 𝐿𝐞𝐥𝐿 Pellicer, and I'm happy to introduce you today to a webinar about income taxes in Spain as a resident and as a non-resident. Today, I'm going to share the webinar with Michael Davis. Hello, Michael.
Hello, 𝐿𝐼𝐿. How are you?
Thank you, very well. Michael Davis is a lawyer, international lawyer in Andalusia, Mojaca, and he's got his offices in Mojaca and Marbella, and he's going to tell us a little bit now, for those who are listening, who probably are on the side of a non-resident, who is considered as a non-resident, and then afterwards, we're going to go and just talk a little bit about who's considered and some legal tips for you to know about resident. Pedro might join us later on because he's been having some technical problems, and we've got our accountant Guillermo here. So we will be able to give you as much information as possible within this hour of webinar. Okay, so I'm going to pass the word over to Michael, and he's going to tell us a little bit who are considered non-resident to start with. Over to you, Michael.
Thank you, 𝐿𝐼𝐿. Well, thank you for inviting us to one of your webinars. I think they're very interesting, and you're doing a very good job at keeping everyone informed. So, very briefly, my name's Michael Davis. I am a Spanish lawyer. I am actually quite a distance from where 𝐿𝐼𝐿 is, because I work in the Andalusia area, and we're in Almeria, Mojaca, and Marbella. I'm specialised in inheritance work, but today 𝐿𝐼𝐿's told me to talk about non-resident tax, and that is what I'm going to talk about, because I'm going to be obedient. Okay, so for those expats that have properties in Spain, they can basically be tax-wise in two situations. They can be a resident, and they can be a non-resident. A non-resident, therefore, basically is someone that spends less than half the year in Spain. In the old days before Brexit, many people were spending more than that amount of days in Spain, more than half the year, and yet they remain under the radar, pretending to be non-residents. But this is all coming to an end because of the passport control now. So now basically you'll be a non-resident only if you spend less than half the year here. So if you're a non-resident, apart from all the normal things that your lawyer will have set up when you purchase the property, that is, he'll have set up the electricity, the water, the rates, the rubbish, and the community of owners, all by direct debit. And I'm hoping and presuming that is all just taking place as normal. That's just through by direct debit. Apart from that, once a year, you have one extra obligation as a non-resident. Now, this is to file a form called 210, and the best translation of the Spanish name would be hypothetical, non-resident hypothetical income tax. Now, it's a bit of a strange one, because what they do is they literally presume that people that are not declaring real income on the rental of their property are actually renting it out at some point and not declaring it. So if you're not renting out your property, what you need to do is present what's called the tax on the hypothetical income. Now, the way they work that one out is they take 1.1% of the catastral value. This is the value of the property that appears on your rates bill, the 𝐸B, okay? And then they tax you at 24.75% of that amount. To cut a long story short, if you have a 2 or 3 bedroom apartment worth anywhere between 150 and 150,000 and 400,000, you'll probably end up paying anywhere between 200 and 500 euro tax a year. Plus, you'll have to pay an accountant or a solicitor or someone a small fee to actually present the return for you. Legally, if you only have one property, you are allowed to present it yourself. So if you want to sort of look into that, you can, but most people use someone in Spain to present it for them, because then they can also respond for any tax problems that you have in Spain, because the taxman will write to them and not to you. Exceptionally, they can consider the income 2% of the catastral value. That's if the rate, the catastral value, the rateable value of the property has not been updated for many years, but that's exceptional. Normally, they consider the income 1.1%. Okay, now what happens if you actually rent out the property and you're a non-resident? Well, then what you've got to do is, in respect to the days that you actually rent it out, you've got to declare the real income. The real income, and then pay the tax on that real income. And then, respect to the days that you have not rented it out, proportionally, you pay the non-resident tax, calculated the way that we have just explained beforehand. Now, so basically, if you are a non-resident and never renting your property out, my advice is to get an advisor, a solicitor, an accountant, or someone to present your annual return, so that basically the taxman knows who to contact if something goes wrong. Now, but there is that exceptional possibility that if you only have one property, you could try and legally do it yourself. If you rent out your property, don't dream of trying to do this, because it will all end up going wrong. So that's it. And the one thing that's happened this year, which is difficult, and maybe Ignacio, because Ignacio's a tax expert, and he could just clarify this for me. My understanding is that when they're taxing the real income now for people from the UK, I understand now that they will not be allowed to deduct any of the expenses that they've had to create that income. Is that correct, Ignacio?
That's correct. As a non-resident, they are not allowing to deduct the expenses. Now he's being treated like a non-European country, and that's one of the for capital gain tax, they're treated the same, okay, with the percentages, but with the income tax return for the rental that you're mentioning, they are just giving these kind of disadvantage. I agree.
Okay, well, that's perfect. I just wanted to reassure myself, because we've got many clients asking us about that, because it's a bit of a game changer. I mean, all through the years, we've always had this situation where we've had American clients, they have bought properties, rent them out, and can't believe that they can't deduct any of the expenses, anything, the rates, anything regarding, and they just get taxed on the full income. It's always been very unfair. But of course, automatically now, after Brexit, UK has now just suddenly gone into that same situation. And so there are lots of people, because of course, the majority of the expats in Spain, the largest majority, at least of our clients, even though are actually from the UK, are British. So suddenly we've got all these people, their tax bill is doubling or tripling if they're renting out their properties. I don't know, nothing. Do you have a lot of clients calling you about the situation regarding the fact that they can't deduct their expenses anymore on their rentals?
Well, at the moment, Michael, not yet, because probably it's too early for people to even notice. A lot of people do not rent, so I didn't have that concern, not very much yet. We've been so busy with the visa situation,
yes,
Michael,
yes,
that probably they're more concerned now on the visa rather than the tax, because as you know, Michael, the taxation is quarterly if you're renting it out. And we're just on the first quarter, so I think probably we didn't have that many questions yet, or probably they were prepared, because who knows, we already informed them in the past.
We've got a lot of people calling us, because when we did the when sort of Brexit, when the transition period ended, on our newsletter, we sent out sort of, you know, how it may affect you. And one of the things that we brought up with this, so we brought it upon ourselves, that suddenly everyone's calling us saying, this is impossible. It can't be, how could it be that way? It doesn't seem fair, reasonable, but of course it is. It is the situation at the moment, unless an agreement is made later on between the UK, you know, the EU and the UK. But at the moment, it's literally everything is we've just been treated as a third country with all the consequences for things like
the situation is only these. Let's call it. It's not an allowance, but deducting the expenses for the rental, Michael, is only European members.
Only European members. Okay.
Only European members.
That's right.
So.
Great.
So, Michael, would you like to finalize with the non-residents? So we do.
Yes, I think that's the main thing. You brought up something that I'd forgotten to say, which is very good. And indeed, if you do not rent the property, the return is presented annually. On one occasion, you present it in arrears. So for this 2021, you present it for 2020. If you're renting out the property, you have to declare the income every three months, and then at the end of the year, the following year, you declare for the days that you didn't rent it out on the hypothetical amount. So I think for non-residents, that is the basic situation for taxation.
Okay, Michael, thank you very much. I'm going to just jump along with Michael with what the tax office considers you as a tax resident. And there is probably, Michael, we could start reading the questions that we have so many, and I'm sure what we could just comment some of them. I'll try to be brief. I'll give you some little tips that a lot of people still do not know. Now, because of UK not being part of the European part of the EU, right? UK is a non-European country, as the US, Canada, etc., etc. So now, as Michael stated, for those who are non-resident, they are having a different treatment. Now, for those who are resident in Spain, they bear in mind now, even though it's at the immigration point, you might have your TIE already in place, you might have the green card and probably swapping in the future, or you could apply now for the non-lucrative visa or golden visa, which is the two common visas that might fit for those who are trying to become resident in Spain. Tourists, if they come for 3 months back and forth, it's not a problem. They will fly over here whenever the UK allows and Spain allows because of the COVID, and no taxation except what Michael said, which is the non-resident tax, which you will only pay if you have a property in Spain. If you rent it out, as Michael stated, then you have the quarterly payments and then the yearly summary. Now, who is considered to become a fiscal resident now? Very important thing, the TIE, right? Whether you did already get it, whether you already have your residential green card, or whether you are applying now for the non-lucrative visa or golden visa, the date that the tax office might take into consideration will be your residencia. That's the first evidence. It's not the only one, but for the tax office is the most important one. Now, being a non-European country, UK, or the US, Canada, and third countries, passport controls are very important. So there is a way of proving whether you've been more than 183 days in Spain or not. Now, you need to bear in mind there is dual taxation treaty between Spain, UK, USA, Canada, many countries, and you could download it. Very important, very similar. And if you go into article number 3, it will say that Spain considers you as a tax resident if you spend more than 183 days here. So if that's the case, the first thing I would recommend you to do, inform the Inland Revenue in your home country that you are a no tax code, very important, and then register here in the tax office once you are more than 6 months with your TIE. Okay, very important, because that's not automatically. There is a lot of people with some residencia and probably never did anything, didn't do the non-resident, didn't do the residency tax. Now, with passport controls, it's very easy for them to control the amount of days here. Now, second, with exchange of information, that with the treaties that we all have now and is applicable, there is a lot of exchange of information between the countries. And as far as I know, and Guillermo could correct me if I'm wrong, the tax office in Spain said that they have 70 sources of information where they just download the information to understand whether you're resident or not. For example, they will or might ask you for water, electric bills, etc., etc. I'm not sure if Michael, probably he had these situations with different clients, people being in Spain, being a tax in the UK, tax office, probably you have your family here, and then tax office just sending you straight away a letter saying why you didn't pay your tax here. And then the burden of proof is down to you for you to say, no, I was a tax code in a different country. So the first piece of advice I will tell you, if you leave your home country, or if you think you're gonna have some issues, get a certificate from the Inland Revenue to say, according to the Dual Taxation Treaty, you are a no tax code in the UK, or you were tax resident in the UK from this year to this year, because that's really what we've been using to protect yourself if you had any tax inspection, because they are reviewing, you know, they could review the files up to 4 years. So it is important because a lot of things haven't been done on time, and now they could just go back to 4. So important advice, if you were no tax resident in Spain before, always ask for a certificate abroad. So once you stay more than 6 months, 183 days in Spain, you inform Spain, you inform the home country, so you're fully legal. After that, if you go into our blog, you will read, or if you go into a website, there is an article, Taxes in Spain, you could be able to see the sliding scale for the taxation. For example, once you become Spanish resident, you need to be paying for the whole income in the world. Important advice as well for you. If you're becoming tax resident in Spain, from January to March, don't forget the 720. That's being a very important form for you to consider, and you will have to load it from January to March. If you have 50,000 euros abroad, bank accounts, even though they're in joint names, assets and shares, or property that was worth over 50,000 euros at the purchase price, okay? Important. That's the first liability as a tax resident in Spain. Yeah, Michael, yes, go on.
Yeah, Ignacio, if I could just jump in there, because we get a lot of questions on this, and I've just seen some questions on the chat as well. That is, a lot of people say, well, you know, how on earth would they find out that we've got assets abroad? Okay, and even though, so basically, I mean, this is a question that comes up all the time. So the problem with this is that it's, of course, maybe the possibility of them finding out that you've got assets abroad. It could be small, but you must not forget that if they catch you out, they can actually charge you up to 150% of the amounts that they find abroad and that you did not declare to the tax office. Okay, the sanctions are so high that the EU has recommended Spain that they revise them. They're just so heavy, but they haven't revised them yet. So that is the potential loss if they catch you. And even though one may think, well, it's unlikely or whatever, must never forget the amount of databases that exist now. The amount of exchange of information at the moment is incredible, and you just never know how they, you know, they've got all different systems now in place to catch you out. I mean, we've even had absolutely crazy situations, Ignacio, when, you know, people have not declared the 720, and yet they're receiving their money in their Spanish bank account from an account in Jersey. So in the end, the bank flags it up. The taxman asks them where's the money's coming from, and from then they just ask until they. Now that's a crazy situation. But even people that are taking more precautions, in the end, they could be found out. And the most important thing to realize is that the problem never goes away, because in the old days, before the 720 existed, if you had that money hidden away somewhere for over 4 years, because of statute of limitation, after that you could bring it in and the tax man could not say anything about it. But now if you've got 200,000 euro hidden away in Jersey, you're not declaring it in Spain, and every year that goes by, you've got that obligation of declaring that money 720. So the statute of limitation can never be used, because each year you're non-compliant by not declaring that money abroad. So the problem never goes away, and you're always exposed to this 150% fine. So what I'm saying with this is, obviously people can do whatever they like, but I think that not declaring assets abroad, with the state of play as it is at the moment, is a very bad decision. That's what I think, personally.
Yeah, thank you, Michael. Yes, going back to actually, Michael. Yes, it's sometimes catch-22 here when we've got the scenarios where, oh, I forgot to do the 720. What do I do now? What sort of fines? What is happening? Do I need to declare it back again next year, etc., etc.? Well, because the declaration of that is only if there is an increase on the value on 20,000 euros, or if you did cancel any title of anything. For example, you sold a property, you cancel your insurance annuity or whatever you have over there. If you did cancel products or just inheritance, for example, that you have the 720, Michael, on one of the things, you see. Yes, probably you didn't mention that. And so it's always good. What I always say, do tax planning and seek independent legal and tax advice. Is cheaper and peace of mind. You know, I recently just had a consultation now with people who made it the very last trip before the lockdown in the UK, coming over here. They seek for advice. They came here. They managed to come to Spain. They got their TIE. They're doing the tax planning, everything, and everything goes great. And I'm glad to see these people instead of having problems. So yes, you always double check and then avoid these fines. As Michael stated, these fines are heavy fines, but they're being contested. But I think, Michael, the fines will carry on, even though it will be much lower. More reason, for example, if you're late on lodging your income tax return, the late fine is 75 euros, you know, just doing it late. That's nothing compared to the 720, isn't it, Michael? So, but they will need to review these kind of fines, which doesn't make sense in a way, because it's per gap, per mistake, per block. So, yeah. So going back to legal tips, and then we'll start the questions. Very important. You're already more than 6 months here. You declare the worldwide assets, and then you do the 720. 720, always review from January to March. Then we start April until June. You do your income tax return. And here we go. Important things for you to know. You receive a civil service pension. That's important for you to say, because it's tax at source, not in Spain. Okay, the rate, it will increase on the total lump sum considered here in Spain, but that is tax-free here in Spain because of the dual taxation treaty. Then you'll have your state pension, and then you'll have different interests. For example, if you have interest abroad, any interest abroad that hasn't been taxed at source here in Spain, you must declare it here in Spain, okay? Now, important tips I will tell you: always use a dual taxation treaty. Second, try to inform always and disclose all the income, as Michael stated, money in the bank. And for example, different tax rates. I did publish here, if you have the time now to click here on the blog. Well, on the right hand side, you'll have a chat. There is La Renta in Spain. Let's click here. Okay. And if you see, I just wrote a little bit of guidance. Try not to be very boring, okay, because tax are difficult, but just to give you minimum ideas and tips for you to know. If you are retired and you're receiving money from abroad, there is one limit, 14,000 euros. If you go over 14,000 euros on pensions, let's say, you must declare it here in Spain. Okay, there is another limit of the 22. I don't want to confuse you with that. It's in the article, But if most of you are pensioners, then I will only concentrate whether you're receiving your pension, not being taxed at source, because you already informed your home country that you are a no tax code. Very important, not to be taxed double. And then if it goes over 14, you declare it. Okay. More things, tips of advice I could give you. Sometimes clients might say, well, I'm not, for example, I have a recent case, a teacher, and didn't know they left. I think they left in January before all this year. And since they left, they thought they were raising last year. They didn't think they had to do the income tax return because they've been retained in Spain, etc., etc., etc. Well, fair enough. She's allowed to have a rebate of 4,800 euros because she's being taxed here. She was working here. They took money, and because of the special circumstances, the taxman owes them money. So it's very important before you even leaving the country to do all this tax planning and see whether you're entitled to a rebate. Because in Spain, everything is based on your personal circumstances. Whether you have children, whether you have dependents, whether you had some special allowance based on, for example, medical situation. Some people are being recognized with a percentage of disability in Spain through the social security. Some people have it abroad and then legalize it through here. And then that makes your tax bracket go lower. Okay, if you're one of those, I will recommend you to contact the social security and try to legalize what kind of illness you have to have the allowance, which it might be more than reasonable. Right, then as I said, you might have income from employment, from pensions, and then you'll have income from interest and dividends. If you see here on the article, I don't know whether you've got it open, the minimum allowance, it will start from 5,550. Then if you're 65, 6,700. And if you're older than 75, you'll have 8,100. And then you'll need to add 2,000 extra if you're a pensioner, okay? So we're talking about, in general terms, for you to understand, from 65, you will have 8,700 euros allowance for this year. And then, depending on your age, it goes a bit higher, okay? Now, there is a further reduction, if you read the article here as well, that it disappears depending on your income. So you have extra depending on the low pensions. For example, if you're on the bracket between the 14 and 16, you might have extra allowance. A lot of you ask me, Ignacio, what about money from dividends and interest? The situation is, if it's up to 6,000 euros, 19%, from 6 to 50, 21%, and from 50 onwards, 23%, but this is only for 2020 because it's been amended for this year. Now, from 50 up to 200,000, that means 2021 has been changed. Okay, so for those who did make a profit over 200, at the end of the day will be 26 for this year. Okay, important deductions, probably if you bought a property before the 1st of January 2013 and you did deduct it as your main residency, unfortunately, this is now nowhere anymore possible for those who buy a property now. So that allowance is an old allowance. Then we have on pension funds, I don't know if you managed to put money into the bank as a pension fund here in Spain, that had an allowance as well, up to 8,000 euros. And some other independently allowance, depending on whether you're in Andalusia, Comunidad Valenciana, etc., etc. Bear in mind always the dual taxation treaty, okay? The dual taxation treaty is important, so you will never pay double. And then I will just say very little, Michael, about the wealth tax. I think in Andalusia now, how much is, Michael, in Andalusia, the wealth tax? I think it changed recently, didn't it? I think the microphone, Michael. I cannot hear.
Yeah, here we have an exemption of on the house up to 300,000 euro for the house, and then it's set up to 700,000 euro is exempt. Yeah.
Okay. That's very good.
They also they've lowered the levels for this year. In this year's budget, they've lowered the actual percentages that you pay on the wealth tax as well this year in Andalusia.
Okay. Well, in this region here, we have the 350,000 euros per person on the main residency, on the main property. And then after that is being 600,000. So per person, so you have the 350, that's up to that money, doesn't count. And then you have the 600. And then after that, there is a sliding scale, which I'm going to put you here in the chat for you to read the article about wealth tax. And it's a sliding scale, not very much, but you just need to be aware of that situation. Okay, Michael, I wouldn't like to I keep giving so much information, and I will prefer to start with questions, shall we? Shall we start with the questions that we're having from Alan? Let me just see. Let me just get here, Alan.
And Hills.
You're asking here, is it best to have both P60s from the UK to cover the tax year 2020 to get an accurate figure of income for 2020 in the UK? Yes, obviously the answer will be yes, it will be excellent, okay? As expats, will you recommend filing the Modelo 720 every year, even if not required to do so, just to be sure? Well, to be honest here, Alan, if there is no obligation, you don't have to, okay? You could lodge it. I wouldn't think it's necessary, and I personally wouldn't think it makes any good, but you could just file the documents. For example, some of the clients are not obliged to do the income tax return, but it's worth proving you're living in Spain. For example, now because of the visa situation, etc., etc. Every little piece of evidence makes you protected. For example, some people didn't even ask for the TIE, and neither the residencia, but they were working here. Now, unfortunately, especially here in this area, they're saying you were in register on the padron before the 31st of December, therefore you don't get the TIE, as simple as that. And then you'll have to appeal that decision, but I don't think they will change, the police office will change the opinion, and they will have to take it to the High Court. For example, if you did your income tax return, that proves as an evidence that you've been here as a resident in Spain. So these little bits of things to prove are good here. I think we've got Pedro. Pedro, can you hear us?
Hola, Ignacio. Hola, Michael. Hello, everybody. Apologize for being late. I have a problem with my Wi-Fi. The electricity went off in the office in Javea, so I had to change into the office in Moraina.
It's raining over there, Pedro. Is it heavily raining?
Well, it's not raining right now, but it's very cloudy, so it looks like it's going to rain. And particularly in this area, it rains a lot when it rains. And it looks like it's going to be a week of raining until probably next Monday, Tuesday in Alicante province, really.
Good, Pedro. We just already started with all the questions. I don't know if you want to just give any tips, 1 minute, 2 minutes, tips of advice on anything, or shall we just carry on with the questions?
Well, let's carry on with the questions, and I assume there are some of them, and then let's go on with some recommendations, tips, or advice, if you could.
Right. It's a good question I have here. Does Spain exchange financial data with the USA? Well, there is no agreement here that allows that exchange of information. So it is a good point here. I think it's Susan, the one who's bringing this question, which is very good, for at least for us to know where we are. And she carries on number 5, saying, my Spanish tax preparer only asks what income is and if I've paid any tax in order to prepare my tax return. Okay, recommendation from our accountant department. It's better to do your tax here where you're resident, right? And then you take it, Susan, to the USA using the dual taxation treaty for them to pay you back whatever they need to deduct. So the place where you are obliged to do your tax as a resident is here, obviously if you spend more than 6 months, okay? And then our recommendation is for you to do it first here and do it back in the States to claim it back. Pedro, were you saying something?
Well, it is, yes. I mean, the question is, it has been said, is for us as advisors, it's like a question is, who knows more about you, Google, Facebook, or tax office? And probably most of the people would say Google or Facebook, which is correct. But tax office, at more and more is getting information from all the tax administration from different countries. And our advice, obviously, is to declare what you should be declaring all the time. So it's not the matter of if the tax office is not going to know or not. I mean, it's just what you need to do and do it correctly.
Okay, let's carry on with the questions from Susan. I think we're on number 6. I don't know if people could follow us. Can you follow us now? The number 6 I've got here. What do you say to people who tell us that the Spanish authorities will never know what assets you have in other countries? Big data, right? That's a good question.
I don't know what it says. Big data, it means like a cryptocurrency or bitcoins.
Well, I think she's asking here. What do you say to people? Some people say, no, they will never find you out, and I think that's very careful. That's delicate, Pedro. I think big data, whether they get information from one way or the other, I really don't know. I don't know if Guillermo. I think he said the other day, tax office has 70 sources of information that they use.
Not just a sources right now. He's asking brokers internationally, and of course regarding administration from different countries. He's asking for that. I mean, there is an obligation when you have, as we know, assets abroad Spain or outside Spain, which are over in each pillar over 50,000 euros. You have the obligation to declare them into the Spanish tax office as an informative declaration. It's Modelo 720, which the period of time is from the 1st of January to 31st of March of the following period when you have the asset. For example, if you have this asset in 2020, you should have been declaring this in 2021 from the 1st of January to the 31st of March. Having said that, I mean, as I said, our advice is always to declare, obviously to obtain proper tax advice in order to what kind of assets you need to declare, what kind of assets or income you should be declaring in base imponible general, which is the general income, or base imponible de ahorro, which is the saving account area, which are two different queues in order to be put it into the tax declaration. But obviously, our advice is always, Ignacio and Michael, is always to do things as by the book. I mean, at the end, declare things as it has to be done. And when it's adapted, obviously, sometimes there is a gray area when some criteria, some tax advisor says one thing, some other one says another thing. Of course, it's just to check perfectly and be careful what is not declared, because at the end it could be fine, and some could be up into the 50% of what it should have been declared. So you need to be taking care about what is declared or not.
Yeah, it's good advice actually, because some people used to come saying, Ignacio, but this is tax. You've got an allowance. You could just withdraw pensions, 25,000 euros or 25%, they said. But that's in the UK, and you need to make yourself your question. Are you tax resident in Spain? Well, therefore, if you do tax planning, is it great? Because let's say some of the people who are listening are coming over to Spain. Well, it's a great time to do tax planning. You know, as a non-resident, you could start selling your property. You know, no tax in Spain. Even use all the possible allowance you have in different countries, and then just prepare yourself the retirement. Because now, Pedro, the situation with the non-lucrative visa, they need time to move on here. And then I think they have enough time as well to do tax planning.
Yeah,
I've got a question here from Stacey.
let me just interrupt. I mean, what you say. One of the recommendations. I mean, of course, one of the tips or recommendations, or just in general terms, the concept of a tax return, which is IRPF. If someone wants to Google it, IRPF is Impuesto Renta Personas Físicas. It is for residents. And I don't know if you have explained at the beginning, I mean, in general, what is a resident in Spain and what is a tax resident in Spain. But
yes,
in order to be subject to be tax resident in Spain, you have to live in Spain 183 days. So for those who are applying for residency, there is a difference if they apply at the beginning of the year or at the end of the year. If it's at the end of the year, will become residents in Spain, but will not be that specific year tax residents in Spain. It's just for the transition period. It's perfect to plan, to make estate planning, to make as you said, a tax planning, to prevent situation or to understand scenarios that may happen in the future whenever you obtain pensions, whenever you obtain some dividends, whenever you obtain interests, whenever you sell a property outside and get capital gains. I mean, those things, or whenever you are gonna inherit some, I mean, this or receive a gift or make a gift. I mean, those situations is important to know if you are going to become resident, if you should do it before you become tax resident or not, and when you become resident to make a tax planning.
Okay, Pedro, let's carry on. Thank you for that. I have Alan Hills is asking, he's just making some question in the chat. Yes, 2 crown pensions which can only be taxed in the UK. I have a private pension which is less than the Spanish tax allowance, but I will pay tax on this in Spain. I understand that although the crown pensions are taxed in the UK, the amount is added to the private pension to put me further up the tax tree in Spain. Is it correct, please? Okay, let me just give you here a little bit of piece of advice here. Alan, the situation is if the private pension is lower than 14,000 euros, we could do tax planning, see whether you're going to pay or not to pay and how much is the cost. Because if the pension is below 14, you're not obliged to do the income tax return. Why? First pension is a crown, obviously civil service pension, and the second is below the minimum amount I just said at the beginning of 14,000 euros. So you could be in a probably very good scenario here, unless you have different sort of income. For example, dividends, interest, etc., etc. But it's worth here, Alan, doing that simulation. If your second pension or private pension is over 14,000 euros, so you've got the crown pension and the private pension, then you're obliged to do it. And then, yes, you're correct. They take into consideration both as a total income, even though you will not be taxed on one, but the other one will just have the percentage like if you had the both. Okay, so it is important for those who are civil servant residents in Spain.
Yeah, and it's important to say, I mean, what you said, I mean, these crown pensions, it's exempt and it's included in an item in the declaration that is exempt. But
Pedro, yeah, we have a non-lucrative visa question. Would you like to mention just a little bit? Because I don't want to just I want to be quick on and try to answer as many as we can. Okay. But could you just give us just one thing about the non-lucrative visa and the golden visa for those who might be interested? Is non-lucrative visa required to be non-resident? Okay, can a spouse of an EU citizen that has a TA have non-resident status? I think Stacey needs clarification here. Okay.
Okay, let me just explain briefly what is the grounds or the requirements of a non-lucrative visa. I mean, you don't have to be a European Union citizen, because I mean, at the end, when you apply for immigration on residency matters in Spain, there are like 2 kind of queues. One if you are a European Union citizen, and the other one if you are not European Union citizen. For the non-lucrative visa, you don't have to be European Union citizen. So first thing is that you do not have to be legal in Spain and do not have to have any fine against you that you've been deported outside of Spain. Must be older than 18 years old, and you don't have to have any criminal records. Okay, the basis of a non-lucrative visa is that, and when it was created, it was really for people who wanted to retire or have access to people who wanted to retire to come to Spain and live with savings without working. This is the base. I mean, the non-lucrative visa do not allow you to work. It's forbidden to work. Technically, you cannot work in Spain. And you have to show sufficient money to live. And the period of time that you apply the authorization to be resident in Spain is the first application is for 1 year, and then it's +2, and then it's +5, and go on. +5 means it's like permanent. So those periods of year, when the first one, for 1 year, you need to show that you have enough money to live in Spain from your savings and from income, like a pension, like guarantee income. If you're getting some kind of income which is could change in some way, like income from rentals, income from dividends on some sort of company, or income from capital gains that you get from buying and selling shares, for example, in the stock exchange market, that income will not be really covered in order to show that you have enough money to live. Let's think that the grounds is for retired people who wants to retire or wants to live in Spain on their own savings or pension. But having said that, it really is, the interpretation is being flexible more and more, and obviously some people is getting or having access to this kind of visa without working, and younger, but it has some kind of income, and but it is important to show that you have enough money or sufficient money to live, and that you have access to that money. So first requirement is sufficient money to live. You don't have to be European Union citizen, and you cannot have any criminal records. Another requirement which is important, you have to have access to private health or public health. If you don't have access for the first year, but for public health, you have to get a private insurance to cover whatever is covered by public health, without co-payment and with or included hospitalizations. Okay, and obviously in the application, it could be included the spouse or principal spouse and descendants. And apart from that, this visa is subjective. The time period of applying and getting it comes between 3 and 5 months, I would say. Apart from that, you need to have also a certification from medical or doctor that you don't have any ill or this kind of illness from internationally that are forbidden in order to enter in Spain. And apart from that, it's important to show sufficient money to live. One person minimum is 27,000 euros. For a couple would be 34,000 euros, which is 27 plus 7. If it's another family member, will be plus 7 or plus 7 ongoing for the first year. The same thing for the following 2 years and 2 years. And the 5 years is a simple application. We do not require as proof as the beginning. Okay, and apart from that, Ignacio, I think this is the basis of the non-lucrative visa. It's applied always outside Spain in the Spanish consulate and not personally in Spain. And once you get the visa, once you make the application, the Spanish consulate has 3 months to answer. If it's an answer, normally it takes around 1 month, 2 months time to answer. Then you have 1 month to go and collect the visa in the Spanish consulate. And once you collect it, you have normally it's maximum 90 days to enter in Spain. And once you enter in Spain, you acquire the status of resident in Spain, and you just go to an immigration office to obtain a TIE card with the fingerprints and obtain this identification card.
Okay, Pedro, great. Now, Michael, I'm not sure if you would like to add something. There are so many questions, isn't it? If you want to add something, or shall we carry on?
No, I think it's all been so well answered. It's very interesting listening to Pedro. We know he's an absolute expert in inheritance tax and visas. That I know he's working with such intensity during this last year. It's been incredible for him. Yeah, I think he's probably applied for more golden visas than anyone in Spain at the moment for this year.
Yeah, well, Pedro, actually later on, you could just give just a little bit of on the golden visa, and let's carry on, because we only have 10 minutes, and then we need to move on. I think we've got Georgiana questions here. I think she's saying here, if we own tax-exempt assets outside Spain, which produce tax-exempt income outside Spain, would Spain assess taxes on that tax-exempt income? Well, obviously, that will really depend on what kind of income we're talking about, and I think you will have to send us the type of product to confirm, but it might depend. It might depend on what kind of income you're having. When do I first complete my first tax return? Okay, I don't know what country you're coming from and when you started to become fiscal resident here, but as I said before, Georgiana, the situation if you stay in Spain from a calendar year, because probably we didn't mention this before, Michael, Spain is from 1st of January to the 31st of December. UK, for example, is April to April, and probably different countries use a different system, okay? But in Spain is a calendar year. So here I always say from January to, if you stay here more than 6 months, or let's say if you're from January until July, after July, and you stay more than 6 months, then you are considered to be resident in Spain, okay? Important things, you always, again, so you don't forget, inform the tax office here. You can only connect yourself here after 6 months from your residencia date, okay? Once you have the fiscal certificate here in Spain, you send it off to the Inland Revenue, the FD9 form in the UK, for example, and you inform them that you're a tax resident here and they need to disconnect you. And then you make a claim from on that form for them to give you back the money they tax you while you're being resident here in Spain. There is a gap you will fill in there to say, I'm being taxed from this date. Normally Spain works from January to December. Okay, Georgiana. So well, I think that was Carol, the question. The second question was from Carol. We've got, let's move on. Let's move on with, we've got a question here, pension funds, and I think that's important. How are they calculated in the wealth tax? I did just, by the way, post you here in the chat, the article, even if you go into a website, the blog, and then you've got the article on taxes, you will be able to find more about different topics on tax. And the one for wealth tax is there. And here he's saying that I have a private pension fund which I can withdraw as a lump sum at 60, subject to income tax, of course. Will that be a part of my wealth for the wealth taxation calculation? The answer is no. That's income and that's pension. So don't get confused here. One thing is the wealth in general, and things is income from pensions. Okay, so so let's move on. More questions that we're receiving here. I think that one was
there's a very interesting one on capital gains tax.
Okay, where are you, Michael?
That's come through Facebook. Where's it's Alex.
If you want to read it, Michael, I just lost it.
Yeah, it's quite convoluted, but I've got the gist of it now.
Okay.
Okay, basically, what's happened to Alex is he's being charged capital gains tax, and he's sort of thinking, why can't he claim the exemption of capital gains tax because he's reinvested. But his problem is that he was non-resident, and he declares non-resident up to 2019. Then in 2020, he considers himself a resident for a short period of time, okay? But we don't know whether he had a residential card or not. And what's happened is that if he had sold his property as a resident and bought the other one within 2 years, we know it would have been exempt. If he'd done it the wrong way round, within 6 months, we know also that it could have been deducted. But what wasn't clear is whether he was resident or non-resident at the moment of sale. But he obviously couldn't prove that he was a resident because they made the 3% retention. So what he's saying is that he thinks that the problem is simply because he did it the wrong way around. In other words, first he bought and then he sold, but that's not his problem. The problem is that at the moment of him making the sale, he obviously couldn't prove that he was a resident, because otherwise they wouldn't have made the 3% retention that they're mentioning here.
That's right.
We'd have to look at it in more detail, but I think his case is almost impossible. Maybe Pedro can have a think about it as well. But I think that the problem is not what he's saying. He's saying it's because he did it the wrong way around. No, the problem is because he couldn't prove that he was a resident.
I fully agree.
The exemption for reinvestment is only if you are a resident selling the property. And I don't think that, or at least I know that he couldn't prove it when he sold because the retention.
But Michael, probably the only way out here, I'm not saying it's possible, is if he could prove was resident and if he's able to do the income tax return late. I don't know. That's
yes.
And then just you need to prove
the notary insisted on the retention taking place.
Yes.
So he's got a lot of things going against him, okay? They're doing it in the wrong order is not essential, because you can do it in the wrong order by 6 months, but you've got to prove that later on, and you normally do it with the mortgage and you cancel it with the money from the sale. He didn't do that, but the main thing is this business of the residency. And when he should have thought this is at the moment of sale. In other words, if he thought he was a resident when he was selling, he shouldn't have allowed the sale to go ahead and the retention being made, because all over that title deed now, it says that he was a non-resident. And and because he signed the title deed, or someone did with power of attorney, he's actually said that he was non-resident.
Yeah, I fully agree. I think it's very difficult. It's very difficult because now is to undo what you didn't do. So you know, I need to undo, and then I did so many steps saying I was non-resident. Now I need to say, oops, I was resident, I didn't do it. I'm doing late. I'm paying late. I'm paying late. So you do your income tax return.
And in any case, I mean, the thing is, what he's saying here is that in January 2020, this house that he sold became his main residence. Okay, that he'd been non-resident up to 2019 and paying his 210. And then in 2020, he considers that he became a resident in that house and then sold it in May. I mean, and on the title deed of sale, he's declared it as a non-resident, because that's why they made the retention. So I just think it's too flimsy there. That he was a resident. I think. I think it's
the only way I think Ian was mentioning here. The only way, if there is a way, will be for him to do the income tax return as a resident. But I agree with you, Michael. Is a point, because you need to do it, claim it back. And
he'd have to claim that he made a mistake on that title deed.
That's right.
As a non-resident.
Not an easy thing. I agree.
It's
he'll need to speak to somebody who could just, with paperwork in the hand, could give you percentages.
I think what I would do is if I was him, I would go back to the solicitor that handled the sale, because he'll know the detail of why the notary insisted on him being a non-resident, because I'm presuming that what they did is they spoke to the tax man. The tax man said, we can't certify that he's a resident, no proof there. And maybe they get that solicitor, find him a solicitor that's an expert in this material, and together see if there's any chance. But it looks very difficult. I understand what's happened, but I think the chance of it being of him being able to overturn all that would be difficult.
Okay. Let's see, which one, Michael, do you think, because we're running out of time, which one else you think it might be relevant here? Obviously, we cannot answer all of them.
How about this one about the golden visa from Mr. Darrell McDonald? He's saying, can I get a golden visa with only a Florida state background check, or is an FBI report required? Okay, I've had experience with that. I didn't know that in the States they had two types of criminal record certificates, but they do. And in our case, they required the FBI one. They turned it down because we didn't have the FBI one. Now, off the grapevine, I've heard that other people have presented it with just the state criminal record background, and it's worked. But in my experience, we had a golden visa turned down initially because we didn't have the FBI certificate. So we obtained it and presented it that way. I don't know what your experience is on that, Ignacio, Pedro. Pedro,
would you like to mention?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with what you said. I mean, the FBI report is, in my opinion, will be required in that Spanish consulate in Florida. And we have some experience with the Chicago and some other ones, and it's being required. But if he already get the Florida state background, normally the criteria of the visa tips or the Spanish consulates broad. Well, it shouldn't be changed, and it should be in the web page of the Spanish consulate. It should be included, or if it's included the FBI report or not. In this case in Florida, I assume it is, but I will take it later. And if the name is Darren, if you could send us an email, that would be fantastic, and I will get back to you and give you an accurate answer about that. But in my opinion, I mean, it's required, the FBI report, and we'll take some weeks on that.
Yeah, we in our case, we had one turned down. I mean, that's from, I mean, we've always, all the clients of ours have always asked for the FBI one. This client didn't, they asked for this other one, and it was turned down. Yeah.
Okay, I think Michael, here is the email. If you want to write it down, because once we close the chat, it will disappear. Or Pedro.
I think better if they write to Pedro, who's an expert in golden visas. I think that would be the best thing if they write to Pedro.
Okay, Pedro, could you please leave your email and Michael and your both telephone number before we leave? Because I know all this is very general, and a lot of people might need specific advice, obviously. I might recommend you, again, if you go into our website, you'll find so many articles about living in Spain. Okay, which might be very useful. And then we'll be happy to do a private consultation if you need, or whatever is considered video conference. Yeah, Michael, we could do all over Spain here, and the three of us. So I'm going to pass it on to Juanfran to share a video. I'm going to say goodbye, but before I go, I'm going to say that we've got next week, in a week time at 5 o'clock, a webinar about golden visa specifically. So it might be very useful for Darren. And then we will try to update you on the law in Spain, as we have been doing from last year. Okay, Michael, so thank you very much.
Thank
Michael,
you. Thank you for inviting
Pedro,
me. Thank you.
And over to Juanfran.
Pedro, very glad to see that you made it in the end. Very good. See you.
Okay, Juanfran.
Bye.
You're new to Spain and in need of legal help. When you're in a country that is foreign to you, you want someone who speaks your language, who understands you, and who will have an answer to all immigration and nationality matters. At Pellicer Heredia, you can count on a specialist in international law and a multidisciplinary team that can help you handle all the necessary formalities. Do you want to take advantage of the Golden Visa program? We will help you obtain the residence visa for investors through the purchase of a property or via a business project that you're looking to develop in Spain. Do you need a residence permit? Obtain it for non-profit purposes or through family, work, study, research and training purposes. If, on the other hand, what you are looking for is a renewal, we take care of the whole process, so all you need to do is leave your fingerprint. We also deal with re-entry permits in the case that you want to leave and return to Spain. And of course, we help you obtain the certificate of registration as a European citizen, the foreigner's identity number, Spanish citizenship, and the certified translation of documents in all languages. Because at Pellicer Heredia, we know that speaking your language is the only way to gain your confidence. Trust that we repay with 2 words: professionalism and commitment. Pellicer Heredia, international lawyers.